Hello, TGC Requiem here. I am going through and doing an updated deck tech on Modern Death Shadow Jund. Played it for somebody a little bit earlier, a few weeks back, um, but then it had a bit of a, I don't want to call it a resurgence. It had a thrust into the limelight after three players, I think Josh Utter-Layton, Sam Black, and Jerry Thompson did really well with it at GP. Josh Utter-Layton won the thing, and the other two finished in the top four. And then one of the team players who was on the team that won an SCG Open was playing the same deck, basically. And so it got kind of thrust back into the limelight. So what I wanted to do is show an updated version of the deck list, do an updated deck tech, and kind of just show what I'm playing. My list is slightly different from the list that they're running. Everybody's is actually a little different. There's some room for customization, but we're going to run through the list and kind of explain, how the deck works. The big thing is the deck is trying to make use and abuse Death Shadow. So Death Shadow gets -X, where X is your life total. So once you get down to 12 life, he becomes a 1/1. If you get down to 1 life, he's a 12/12. So the old version was heavily in on Teamer Battle Rage, where you would give your target creature double strike until end of turn. With the Ferocious, they would also get trample, so you would be able to trample over for large chunks of damage. Sometimes you would even have more damage than just say 12 double strikes, because you would also have like a Become Immense. But this version, very much different. Not really very much into the Battle Rage combo. It is a very potentially grindy deck while also being pretty explosive. So the deck essentially runs 8 creatures. It runs 4 Death Shadow and 4 Tarmogoyf. Tarmogoyf's power and toughness is equal to the number of cards in all graveyards, and its toughness is equal to that same number plus 1. So its power and toughness are basically equal to the number of cards in the graveyard, but the toughness gets a single point bump. Basically, it plays these creatures. There are 5 other creatures in the deck: Ghor-Clan, Rampager, and Street Wraith, but they're not really played as creatures in the vast majority of the games that you play. In the vast majority of the games, you are trying to get Death Shadow and Tarmogoyf and take advantage of just having stronger, cheap creatures that are really more powerful than they should be for their mana cost. To help get Death Shadow to a power where he can, say, outsize a lightning bolt, or do well in creature combat, you run a large number of fetch lands. So we're actually running 12 fetch lands, and then we're running 4 shocks with 2 basics. Now, a big part of the game is running these fetches, getting a shock, and shocking it upright. Sometimes when you don't have anything to cast, just to get your life total to the range where Death Shadow can be cast. If your opponent attacks you in the meantime, he's just helping you get to the point where Death Shadow can be cast and be pretty much one of the biggest creatures on the battlefield. Now, to get to these 8 creatures, since you're basically only running 8 creatures in a 60-card deck, you have a couple things. You have Mishra's Bauble, which you can sacrifice, costs 0, but it's an artifact that you can sacrifice, allowing you to look at the top of target player's library, and then you'll draw a card at the beginning of the next upkeep. So this essentially cantrips. Street Wraith, which is one of your other creatures that you don't actually typically use as a creature, can cycle, which it's not a counterable effect, basically. I shouldn't say it's not counterable, but generally speaking, it's not something that gets countered, because you don't see a whole lot of stifle type effects in Modern. But basically, you pay 2 life, discard this card, and draw a new card. So that's 8 cantrip type effects. And then, kind of in place of Gitaxian Probe, which was recently banned, with pay 2 life and look at your opponent's hand, draw a card. Now you have Traverse the Uvenwald, which is a single green. Search your library for a basic land card, reveal it, put it in your hand, then shuffle your library. However, if you have Delirium, meaning you have 4 different card types in your own graveyard, instead of searching your library for just a basic land, you can search your library for a creature or land card, reveal it, put in your hand, and then shuffle your library. So not only is it a draw card, it's actually a tutor that allows you to go get a Death Shadow or to go get a Tarmogoyf. Sometimes you go get a Street Wraith just to do more damage to yourself so that you can cast the Death Shadow in your hand. It's also used to go get the Ghor-Clan Rampager, which we talked about as the other creature, which is typically put on the battlefield for its Blood Rush ability. Its Blood Rush ability being that you can pay a green and a red to discard it, and then a target attacking creature gets +4/+4 and gains trample until end of turn. So sometimes you get into a bit of a board stall where you can't attack your opponent because if you attack them, you might not kill them, but they'll strike back at you and kill you because you have such a low life total. So Ghor-Clan Rampager allows you to do that trample damage over the blockers to potentially win the game. So Traverse lets you get that. It also, again, can go get you a land once Delirium turns on. So you could go get a fetch land, crack the fetch land to go get an Upright Shock to do 3 damage to yourself, which again you might want to do to make your Death Shadow bigger. Similarly, you can do the same thing to get a shock for 2 damage. So it's all just kind of dependent upon what you want your life total to be, and so a large part of playing this deck is managing your life total. So those are your creatures. We kind of talked about the artifact and bauble. Right now there's I guess a lot of creatures in the format that are strong and powerful and cheap. And so right now the deck is running 4 Fatal Push to help clear the way because you are playing these powerful creatures. The earlier iterations of the deck didn't play this many Fatal Pushes main deck. Some of them were playing them in the side, but the format's kind of gotten to the point, even if you consider just the mirror match, Fatal Push helps in the mirror match. And again, it's basically destroying roughly 90% of the creatures in the format for 1 black mana. And some of those creatures may require that you enable the Revolt feature, which is destroy the creature with converted mana cost 4 or less, requiring a permanent to have left the battlefield this turn. But you have 12 fetch lands and 4 Mishra's Baubles to help facilitate keeping Revolt on. Plus sometimes your creature gets killed, and then in response to a creature getting killed you can Fatal Push. Tarfire is actually like a weaker lightning bolt. However, it does still hit a fair number of creatures, but the key thing here is it's a tribal instant, and tribal is just one more type of card in the graveyard to make your Tarmogoyfs bigger. In fact, actually I laid the deck out for this deck tech to kind of show the different types that are available in this deck. So you have lands, Mishra's Bauble, creatures, instant, but then you also have tribal here, sorcery, and planeswalker. So you have 7 different card types. The only real one that you're missing from Modern would be enchantment. And so you're running 7 card types. Your Tarmogoyfs can get as big as a 7/8 just through your deck alone. Some people have cut a Tarfire to run a Seal of Fire, which is an enchantment. But I like the instant speed use of Tarfire a little bit better. Often you use Tarfire to shoot yourself. Happens quite frequently, especially considering you can't kill your opponent's creatures often if they have 3 toughness, and so you may just hit yourself with a Tarfire again in an effort to grow your Death Shadow and simultaneously growing your Tarmogoyfs. Temur Battle Rage, we do still run 1 just as a extra way of potentially getting through a bunch of chump blockers, similar to Ghor-Clan Rampager, except double striking and trample is a bit more damage than just +4/+4 and trample typically. 1 Abrupt Decay just for problem permanence. Kolaghan's Command plays a pretty unique role in the deck. I've actually cut it down to 2 in an effort to get the Abrupt Decay in there. And And basically, along with being able to destroy a lot of the problematic permanents like Ensnaring Bridge or Chalice of the Void, basically it allows you to recur these creatures, so they're going to get killed. Lots of people know that the deck's out there now. They're going to try and kill your creature, and this allows you to return those creatures to your hand. So while you only have 4 creatures or 8 creatures in the deck rather that you're typically trying to play, you have ways to get them back, and that's very similar to the reason we have Liliana. Liliana can ultimate, with using the plus or -2/-1 uptick ability to kill creatures and eventually create an army of zombies. But her -2 ability to put the top 2 cards of your library into your graveyard and return a creature card from the graveyard to your hand is really the big reason why she's in the deck. We only have 8 creatures, but we have multiple ways to go find replacements when they die, and we have multiple ways between Kolaghan's Command and Liliana to go find or to recur them from the graveyard rather. So Kolaghan's Command is just a really flexible card. I was running 3 for a while. 2 feels pretty good. I wouldn't blame anybody for running 3, but right now I'm running 2 just to get the Abrupt Decay back in there. It just seems like we need a little bit more removal similar to Fatal Push that destroys something rather than doing small amounts of damage. So we already talked about Traverse the Ulvenwald. Sometimes early you do have to play it just to go get a land. The most frequent times that I play it very early to go get a land is when I'm trying to, I guess, rush out a Liliana, or just, again, I'm potentially stuck on 1 land. And then you're running 8 hand disruption effects in Inquisition of Kozilek and Thoughtseize. And Thoughtseize, again, you can run 4 here. Part of the bonus of this is, you're trying to lose 2 life. You want to lose some life to get your Death Shadows. And so Thoughtseize helps facilitate that. And then Inquisition, just no life loss, but still very good at disrupting your opponent. So what this does is this allows you to, ideally turn 1, disrupt your opponent, turn 2, potentially play a creature, such as Tarmogoyf for Death Shadow, though Death Shadow on turn 2 tends to require you losing quite a bit of life, often with a couple Street Race or 2 fetches and a Thoughtseize, etc. And even then you have a very small Death Shadow. So you have to be careful with that, especially against red decks. But the other thing is, it's worth noting that basically there's a variety of ways to turn on Delirium, which is important for the Traverse. So when you're thinking about the sequencing of your plays, a fetch land plus a sorcery is pretty common. So you're generally going to have a fetch land and a sorcery between one of your hand disruption spells and your lands right away. So that gives you 2 types. So Tarfire turns on Delirium. So by itself, because it's both an instant and a tribal. And it's very nice because it can be fired at yourself or your opponent to get in the graveyard. Fatal Push sometimes is a little more difficult to get into the graveyard early if you're trying to turn on an early Traverse, similar to Temur Battle Rage. And Abrupt Decay for that matter. Plus Kolaghan's Command being 3 just makes it a little bit slower. So typically when you're trying to look at or consider how good Traverse is in an early hand or an opening hand, you want to consider the fact that, again, you're needing some combination of 4 cards, and you can very easily, typically, with your fetch lands and your hand disruption, pair a Mishra's Bauble and a Street Wraith, or a Tarfire. And similarly, you could do Tarfire, Mishra's Bauble, and a fetch land, or Tarfire, fetch land, and hand disruption. So just those are kind of the common quick ways to hit 4 very early that could allow you to, as early as turn 2, cast Traverse with Delirium. So just something to keep in mind. It's relevant for the sideboard specifically. A lot of the decks are running 3 Fulminator Mage. One of the key things, I shouldn't say key things, but one of the differences I kind of have in this list, in my list, is I'm running a Ghost Quarter. I saw somebody write it in like the comments of an article, and it makes a lot of sense to me to run 1 Ghost Quarter over the 3rd Fulminator Mage. because you can potentially, with your opening mana, fetch for a Blood Crypt, which is going to get you your land. You may have a Mishra's Bauble or a Street Wraith to get you, the second card type. And then if you fire off a Tarfire, that gets you 3/4 Delirium. If you have a second fetch land, you can then, I'm saying this backwards, aren't I? No, that's right. So you fetch, you fetch Mishra's Bauble, Street Wraith, and Tarfire. You've only spent 1 mana to Tarfire on your opponent's turn. On your turn, if you were to actually, I apologize, use a green-red mana. So if you were to have a Stomping Ground, you can fire the Tarfire off while having used your Mishra Bauble, Street Wraith. On your opponent's turn, use the Stomping Ground to cast Traverse to go get a Ghost Quarter, and then Ghost Quarter like your opponent's Tron land or a Valakut. And ideally you're going to do that because we're running heavily on Surgical Extraction to basically shut those decks down. So you don't need more than 1 in my opinion. But again, it is a traverse target that allows you to, as early as turn 2, search up a tutor to blow up your opponent's land and hopefully eat it so that you don't have to deal with Tron until, never deal with Tron, but not have to deal with Karn until turn 7. So Fulminator Mage, though, is nice because it has the benefit of being able to be recurred with Kolaghan's Command and Liliana. And so there are grindier games where you want to have access to those as well. Let's see here. So Surgical Extraction we kind of already talked about in terms of how it ties in with Ghost Quarter and Fulminator Mage against big mana strategies. But it also is really good because you're running 8 hand disruption effects. You are running some kill effects for decks that are worth, have creatures worth surgically extracting. And you can actually go up to 10 hand disruption spells, at least in the build I'm running. A lot of them run 3 Collective Brutality. I'm only running 2. I don't find the burn matchup to be really bad. Like the old version, it's not necessarily great, but it's not really bad either. So I run a couple Collective Brutality for that matchup. That gets you up to 10 hand disruption. And so again, ways to surgically extract. Nice thing about Collective Brutality is it can hit in like the Valakut matchup. You could hit Scape Shift, so it gives you a couple extra ways to hit those bigger spells. Similar to Thoughtseize hitting Ad Nauseam, Collective Brutality can hit Ad Nauseam. Run Liliana the Veil for more controlling matchups or decks that are running fewer big creatures. So it would be really good in the Mirror, for example, as essentially an extra removal spell, but also good against control in terms of just why she's always been good against control. The Terminate is, again, for just those bigger creature decks or when you're trying to fight creature decks in general, you need an extra piece of more powerful removal. Ancient Grudge, Affinity, Lantern. A lot of times there's decks that are trying to Chalice, sorry. So like Chalice that are trying to lock you out on 1 because a lot of your deck is cast at 1 CMC. So Ancient Grudge is good against those as well. And then the reason that we splash the white, the one Godless Shrine, is to be able to cast Lingering Souls. So in some of those controlled matchups where your opponents, or even just grindy matchups, and the Mirror, for example, there's going to be a lot of removal, and so it just gives you an extra way to fight, an extra access to fight. And I know Jerry Thompson had made some comments about it being average or okay or whatever, but I actually feel like this has gone a long way towards helping in some of those grindier matchups, like a Jund or an Abzan, things like that. So that is the deck. I'm going to go ahead and play it through a league. I've actually played it through 4 leagues, 4 friendly leagues over the last week or so, and I've gone 14-6 with the deck. It's really, really solid. I'm sure the format's going to adjust to it. I definitely think it can be beat. I don't think there's anything about the deck so far that is proving to need a ban down the road. If it proves for a good long while that it's oppressive, it's probably Traverse. There are some costs to to basically being able to use Traverse, but once you get it, I mean, I think we're still kind of scratching the surface a little bit on this deck. Being able to go get your creature, tutor for specific creatures for 1 mana, Ghost Quarter, different kind of hate cards. You can go get a lot of lists run like Hataki or War's Wage and different hate cards for different matchups. It's very possible Traverse is the card that kind of pushes it over the limit, but again, I think we're a ways away from any real legitimate talk like that. So anyway, we're going to go ahead and play a league. Hopefully you enjoy.